25 people right now inside the city bank. We're at right now. Names and persons. I called the NLC. There's the number. I called them. They know that this is happening. Give her all of your names. Give her all of your names.
Welcome, Mr. Chairman. We have spent a lot of time in Congress talking about the $700 billion TARP bailout, which I voted against as it happens. Not a whole lot has been talked about with regard to the $2.2 trillion that the Fed has lent out. Now, I find it absolutely extraordinary that I wrote you a letter and I said, hey, who'd you lend the money to? What were the terms of those loans? How can my constituents in Vermont get some of that money? Who makes the decisions? Do you guys sit around in a room? Do you make it? Are there conflicts of interest? So my question to you is, will you tell the American people to whom you lent $2.2 trillion of their dollars? Will you tell us who got that money and what the terms are of those agreements?
We explain each of our programs. In terms of the terms, we explain the terms exactly. We explain what the collateral requirements are. We explain what.
To whom did you explain that?
It's on our website.
Yeah. Okay.
So all that information is available in our commercial paper program.
And who got the money?
Hundreds and hundreds of banks. Any bank or that has access to the U.S. Federal Reserve's discount.
You tell us who they are.
No, because the reason that is counterproductive and will destroy the value of the program is that banks will not come to the discount.
Isn't that too bad?
Sorry?
In other words, isn't that too bad? They took the money, but they don't want to be public about the fact that they received it. We heard a whole lot about AIG. They're in the front pages.
These are very
now, I got banks and I have businesses in the state of Vermont who are in a lot of trouble. Not banks. Our banks, by the way, are doing pretty well. Now, how do these guys who are honest business people get it? Do you have to be a large, greedy, reckless financial institution to apply for these monies?
There is no subsidy. There is no capital involved. There is no gift involved. It is a collateralized, short-term liquid loan that is both over-collateralized and is recourse to the company itself. We have never lost a penny doing it.
And how can other institutions get those loans as well?
According to the law, we are supposed to be lending to depository institutions.
Let me just say this, Mr. Chairman. I have a hard time understanding how you have put $2.2 trillion at risk without making those names available, those institutions public. And we're going to introduce legislation today, by the way, to demand that you do that. It is unacceptable to me that that goes on.
Bernanke has in secret spent hundreds of billions of dollars bailing out one group and not bailing out another group. I don't see anybody in the news media demanding the kind of transparency at the Fed that you would demand of every other aspect of the federal government. And I think it is corrupt and it is wrong for one man to have that kind of secret power.
So, Congressman Paul, where do you come down on this?
One thing I might say that we have made some inroads on the Federal Reserve. We passed a bill last year. We got a partial, audit of the Fed, and we've learned a whole lot. They were dealing in $15 trillion. $5 trillion went overseas to bail out foreign banks. But you know what? Congress did a lot. I've worked on it for a good many years. But Bloomberg helped and Fox helped. They had court cases, Freedom of Information Act. And there are some even at this table who didn't think auditing the Fed was such a good idea, that we could call up the Fed and ask them, and they would tell us what they're doing. I've been calling them up for 30 years, and they never tell me. But we're getting to the bottom of it. But if you want to understand why we have a problem, you have to understand the Fed, because the cause comes from the business cycle. We shouldn't be asking what to do exactly with the recession. Obviously, we have to deal with that, but you can't cure the disease if you don't know the cause of it. And the cause is the booms. When there are booms, and they're artificial, whether it's the CRA or whether it's the Fed easy credit, when you have bubbles, whether it's the NASDAQ or whether it's the housing bubbles, they burst. And when they do, you have to have corrections, and that's what we're dealing with. And we can do this by building coalitions and not sacrificing any principles.
Juliana?
Thank you, Chair.
Let me go to housing. What would you do? Would you get the federal government out of housing? Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no need to. Look at
no Freddie Mac, no Fannie Mae, nothing.
That's where the distortions come. That's where the moral hazard comes from. That's where the malinvestment, they overbuild.
We're going to do yet another skit. You're going to play the investor. We're going to sell you some investments. I'll be the bank once again. And I've asked Sherrod Small to come back. Nice to see you, my man. How are you?
I'm doing.
You're going to play the ratings agency. You are the one in charge of what happens here. So let us commence the morning meeting Masterpiece Theater. First, I'm going to create a housing bond with a house inside of it. If you wouldn't mind not looking, please. I'll get back to you later.
Right.
You're not allowed to see this. This is between me and the ratings agency. I'd like to get a AAA rating for this house bond, if you don't mind. You notice it's a full house, has a chimney, a family, they can pay the bills.
Nice house, nice house. Is that stucco?
Yeah, it's stucco. Okay. How much will that be? Because I'm going to pay you to rate that, mind you.
Okay, you're going to
take that.
Let me take that. Okay, there we go. Right. You're going to get a AAA on this one.
Thank you very much.
That's going to be a
would you like to buy a AAA rated housing bond?
Absolutely. I represent pensioners across the country, teachers, civil servant workers, private sector pensions. I've got a AAA rating, and I feel good because I'm not crazy about the color of this house. Pink isn't
it's a real house.
But it's a house. It's got a roof, windows. It's a real house.
I hope that the policemen and the teachers for whom you mentioned manage the pension money for enjoy their fine returns.
That's right. They've got collateral. They got collateral here.
As long as I keep paying you, we're going to be fine. No, don't take the money yet. I got to make something here. Hang on. Now I got it. This is the version 2. This is more like house parts. So I've got
parts of a house.
I got sink part here. I got here's a sink. I've got I don't know. You can take a look in there, but it looks AAA to me.
Well, it don't look too AAA. It's not a real house. It's not an actual house.
What if I gave you a stack of 50s?
It's looking a little houses.
Yeah.
It's looking a little more housey.
Yeah. Now see what I'm saying? Like you could totally live in. If I give you another stack of hundreds, I suspect it'll look real.
This is a house. This is AAA house for me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are you bribing him?
This is how Wall Street works. This is not a bribe. This is how.
There you go. So I got it back here. Does this come with instructions?
No.
I got to go back to the people I represent.
It's like Home Depot. It's like Home Depot. You can do it. We can help.
This house was what we call transparent. I could see the house on this one. This one we're hiding something. But you're saying it's AAA. Hey,
I'm saying it's AAA.
I got AAA for my pensioners.
Teachers will be fine.
We're all set.
I'm doing the rating over here.
This seems to be going pretty well. By the way, I'm making a small fortune selling this stuff, I must say. I got this one here. Is what I like to call mystery meat.
Dylan,
but it's
Jonathan,
go ahead.
Dylan, I'm confused.
Yeah.
I'm confused. So you, the bank, pay the rating agency to give a AAA rating to something you're trying to sell?
Yeah, but Jonathan, nobody's supposed to know that.
Yeah,
that's the secret. Jonathan, that's the secret we don't want anybody to know. They're buying that rating, but shh, don't tell the real world.
Mind your business, Jonathan.
Because then they'll get wise to this scam.
Not to mention, Jonathan, if you keep talking like this, how am I supposed to make money? Okay, if I can't bribe the ratings agency, what kind of business am I going to have? Anyway, back to business.
Carry on.
Oh, sorry, here you go.
Now, this is just a bag of
Well, look inside. You'll see. It's a very valuable asset there.
Okay, it's like advertisement for condos.
It's more of a These are more house concepts.
Oh,
this is like things in the future that could become houses.
I've seen that ad before.
That's a nice
They just cut the price on that one.
They cut the price. Well, I don't know if I can AAA this. This is not. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see if this hand is out there.
These.
Okay,
and I got a stack of those.
You got yourself a AAA.
I got a stack of these.
You got yourself a AAA.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Here we go. And now, you know what? I got a big bag of junk.
Yes.
And you know what the problem is? Well, I'm going to wake up someday, and I'm the pension, whether I'm CalPERS or whether I'm the New York State Pension Fund, and I have invested all this money, and I'm supposed to, I'll take off this. I'll take off that. This is now serious stuff. I am now seeing my pension fund go from $150 billion to about $100 billion if I'm the New York State Pension Fund, and suddenly I've got all these pension obligations, and I'm holding junk that is worthless. And so how do I pay the pensions of all these hardworking men and women whose money we've taken over the years? We told them we were going to secure it, and we're holding paper that you've paid to get a AAA rating on, and this is a bribe. Ugly word, it's commercial bribery, and that's what's been going on, and we are now holding junk paper. So how do we pay these pensions?
I got to wrap this up, but very briefly, what can we do to fix this system? Because clearly it is broken.
We have got to first stop the payments to the rating agencies for putting on a AAA that is simply unwarranted. We've got to restore some integrity to the system, and we've got to also understand that these bonds are worthless. And we've got to write them down. They repealed mark-to-market after a while. That's why financial security stocks went right back up. We've got to be real about what this stuff is worth.
I think what frustrates people, and Jonathan, you can jump in here and then we'll wrap it up, is that these garbage bags, particularly that last one, ends up at the Federal Reserve, that the banks have kept the money that that made creating the garbage bags, that the ratings agency kept, he's got his loot,
everybody
and the
wins.
American taxpayer has this.
That's right. Everybody wins except the taxpayer that inevitably comes in, and all that trillions of dollars that have gone to the banks have bailed everybody out. But the taxpayer is footing the bill for the incompetence and the gamesmanship on Wall Street that inflated this huge bubble that is now deflating, and that huge sucking sound is taxpayer money flowing out of our pockets right into the pockets of the banks.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Maybe we could have another skit, because I want to know how we went from slapping on a AAA rating on a whole chicken to slapping a AAA rating on chicken parts. Like, who said that was that's illegal?
This is the beauty of what they call securitization, which is a concept made sense, but when you finely tune and slice thinner, it's like when you go to the deli counter and you say, I want the nice thin roast beef, you know, the middle, they sliced it so thin that they were able to sell off little pieces, and they continued to say AAA, even though you were getting the fat on the outside.
Super thin slices of fat from roast beef still being called AAA.
That's right.
I want to bring you back, because I think a lot of folks are really starting to understand all of this, but they don't know what to do. They feel helpless. They sit there, they're like, this is terrible, but what do we do?
It was predictable. You talked about what economists we should look to. And unfortunately, we've been living with Keynesian economics for many, many decades. And everybody who was right about predicting the bubbles were Austrian economists. They said they were coming. And yet they're also saying, and I agree with them, that everything that we're doing right now is wrong. So what we did with the housing bubble, yes, we had too many houses. It was glaring in our face. The bubble was doomed to burst, and it came because of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, easy credit, and also Community Reinvestment Act. So who got into trouble? The people who did the speculating, the Wall Street, the derivatives market. They got the bailout. They got privileges. So what happened to the middle class? They lost their jobs. They lost their houses. This whole system is all messed up. And what I hear here is just tinkering with the current system and not looking at something new and different. And it's a free market economy without a Federal Reserve System, with sound money. If you don't have that, you're going to continue with the bubble. And this propping up this debt and keeping the correction. You need the correction. You need to get rid of the malinvestment and the debt. The debt is the burden on the economy.
All right, we'll be back. Take a break and be right back. Stay with us from Dartmouth to Hanover, New Hampshire.
I want to read what you said 5 years before the collapse.
The special privileges granted to Fannie and Freddie have distorted the housing market by allowing them to attract capital that they could not attract under pure market conditions. Like all artificially created bubbles, the boom in housing prices cannot last forever. When housing prices fall, homeowners will experience difficulty as their equity is wiped out. Furthermore, the holders of the mortgage debt will also have a loss. These losses will be greater than they would have otherwise been had government policy not actively encouraged over-investing in housing. And you go on to say, because so many people will invest in housing, the damage will be catastrophic. Congressman, how could it be that you knew this on the banking committee in 2003 and nobody else did until after the collapse?
Well, I would think the easiest explanation is Washington, D.C. is permeated by Keynesian economic thinking. Very few even know the name Austrian economics and understand the business cycle. I was concerned about the building of the bubble since 1971 when gold was delinked from the dollar. And to me, the more amazing thing right now is not only has the financial system collapsed, which is very, very bad and very dangerous, I believe that what we're moving toward now is the collapse of the dollar. And the collapse of a dollar, because it's the international reserve currency, I think is going to be much worse than what we have already witnessed.
Congressman Paul.
Since the Federal Reserve is the engine of inflation, creates the business cycle, produces our recessions and our depressions, the Federal Reserve obviously is a very important issue. And fortunately tonight we have a former director of the Federal Reserve at Kansas City. So I have a question for Mr. Kaine. Mr. Kaine, in the past you've been rather critical of any of us who would want to audit the Fed. You said you've used pretty strong terms that we were ignorant and that we didn't know what we were doing, and therefore there was no need for a Fed audit anyway, because if you had one you're not going to find out everything because everybody knows everything about the Fed. But now that we have found and we've gotten an audit, we have found out an awful lot on how special businesses get, bailed out. Wall Street, the banks, and special companies, foreign governments. And you said that you advised those of us who were concerned and you belittled. You say, call up the Federal Reserve and just ask them to get a PR person. So do you still stick by this, that this is frivolous, or do you think it's very important? 64% of the American people want a full audit of the Fed on a regular basis.
Mr. Kaine.
First of all, you have misquoted me. I did not call you or any of your people ignorant. I don't know where that came from.
I'll get it for you.
All right?
Some people say that we ought to audit the Federal Reserve. Here's what I do know. The Federal Reserve already has so many internal audits, it's ridiculous. I don't know why people think we're going to learn this great amount of information by auditing the Federal Reserve. I think a lot of people are calling for this audit of the Federal Reserve because they don't know enough about it. There's no hidden secrets going on in the Federal Reserve to my knowledge. And I tell people, we've got 12 Federal Reserve banks. You find out which district you're in, call them up and go from there. We don't need to waste money with another commission or an audit that's not necessary. Because, folks, we got a lot of other problems we need to worry about. You're listening to the Neil Bortz Show, and this is Herman Cain.
Right. Now, so you got to be careful of the stuff that you get off the internet, because that's just not something that I have said. Secondly, I have also said, to be precise, I do not object to the Federal Reserve being audited. I simply said, if someone wants to initiate that action, go right ahead. It doesn't bother me. So I've been misrepresented in that regard. I don't have a problem with the Federal Reserve being audited.
We don't need to waste money with another commission or an audit that's not necessary.
Mr. Kane, you disapprove of Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, and we all know that your priority is 999. But one of the most important appointments that you're going to have to make your first year, should you be president, would be Fed Chairman. So which Federal Reserve Chairman over the last 40 years do you think has been most successful and might serve as a model for that appointment?
Alan Greenspan.
Why?
Because that's when I served on the board of the Federal Reserve in the early 1990s.
Now, the first of a two-part conversation with former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan.
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
And the way Alan Greenspan oversaw the Fed and the way he coordinated with all of the Federal Reserve banks, I think that it worked fine back in the early 1990s. Now, on that same point, I have already identified two candidates, which I cannot give their names, to replace Mr. Bernanke in anticipation of having that responsibility. We must narrow the mission of the Fed first. I don't believe in ending the Fed. I believe we can fix the Fed by getting their mission refocused on monetary price stability, and I have candidates in mind that will help us do that.
So you have two appointments waiting in the wings for 2013, for that when his term is up 2014.
Yes, I have two candidates waiting in the wings.
How about a hint?
To take that job. I got to keep them confidential.
Okay, Congressman Paul.
Spoken like a true insider. No, Alan Greenspan was a disaster.
Mr. Greenspan, I have long been concerned that you are way out of touch with the needs of the middle class and working families of our country, that you see your major function in your position as the need to represent the wealthy and large corporations. And I must tell you that your testimony today only confirms all of my suspicions. And I urge you, and I mean this seriously, because you're an honest person. I think you just don't know what's going on in the real world. And I would urge you, come with me to Vermont, meet real people. The country clubs and the cocktail parties are not real America. The millionaires and billionaires are the exception to the rule. You talk about an improving economy while we have lost 3 million private sector jobs in the last 2 years. Long-term unemployment has more than tripled. Unemployment is higher than it has been since 1994. We have a $4 trillion national debt. 1.4 million Americans have lost their health insurance. Millions of seniors can't afford prescription drugs. Middle-class families can't send their kids to college because they don't have the money to do that. Bankruptcy cases have increased by a record-breaking 23%. Business investment is at its lowest level in more than 50 years. CEOs make more than 500 times of what their workers make. The middle class is shrinking. We have the greatest gap between the rich and the poor of any industrialized nation, and this is an economy that is improving. I hate to see what would happen if our economy was sinking. Now, today, you may not have known this. I suspect that you don't, but you have insulted tens of millions of American workers. You have defended over the years, among other things, the abolition of the minimum wage, one of your policies, and giving huge tax breaks to billionaires. But today you reached a new low, I think, by suggesting that manufacturing in America doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the product is produced. We lost 2 million manufacturing jobs in the last 2 years alone, 10% of our workforce. Walmart has replaced General Motors as the major employer in America, paying people starvation wages rather than living wages, and all of that does not Matter to you? Doesn't matter. If it's produced in China where workers are making 30 cents an hour or produced in Vermont where workers can make 20 bucks an hour, it doesn't matter. You have told the American people that you support a trade policy which is selling them out, only working for the CEOs who can take our plants to China, Mexico, and India. You insulted Mr. Castle. Mr. Castle, a few moments ago, a good Republican, told you that we're seeing not only the decline of manufacturing jobs, but white-collar information technology jobs. Forrester Research says that over the next 15 years, 3.3 million U.S. service industry jobs and 136 billion in wages will move offshore to India, Russia, China, and the Philippines. Does any of this matter to you? Do you give one whit of concern to the middle class and working families of this country? That's my question.
Congressman, we have the highest standard of living in the world.
No, we do not.
Everybody in Washington, liberals and conservatives, said he kept interest rates too low too long. Of course, the solution was lower them even more, and they think that's going to solve our problem. But if I had to name one person that did a little bit of good, and that was Paul Volcker. He at least knew how to end or help, end the inflation. But of course, with my position that I don't think highly of the Federal Reserve, and I think we should have sound money, and we shouldn't have somebody deciding what the interest rate should be and how much money supply we should have. I mean, nobody satisfies me. But certainly Alan Greenspan has ushered in the biggest bubble. And what did we do? We've continued the same thing, doing the same thing. We think the inflation under Alan Greenspan was bad, so we're trying to solve the problem by inflating even further. So Bernanke compounds the problem. He's inflating twice as fast as Greenspan was. But Greenspan caused so much trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Can you provide for the record a copy of the recusal agreement that you signed when you were at the New York Fed?
I did not sign a recusal agreement. I withdrew from day-to-day management operations policy uses of the New York Fed, and my colleagues, both in Washington and in New York, can attest to that.
So there was no formal agreement?
No, as I said in my testimony, what I did is I withdrew from, and this was very important to do. Again, no precedent for this, as sitting President of the New York Fed being nominated to be Secretary of the Treasury. And I withdrew from, after carefully consulting my colleagues, from involvement in monetary policy decisions. I did not go to the FOMC meeting in December, and I withdrew from all decisions about these individual cases involving the financial system and from day-to-day management. And that was the right thing to do at that time.
Thank you for clarifying that. Number two, a lot of people think that the president of the New York Fed works for the U.S. government. But in fact, you work for the private banks that elected you.
No, that is not true.
Can you provide for the record the names of the handful of bankers on the board of the New York Fed that elected you in 2003, please?
That is a matter of public record, and of course we can do that.
Thank you very much.
But, Congresswoman, can I just say, what you just said was not true. I work in the public interest. Officials of the Federal Reserve work for the public interest, and they work for the government.
But the people don't elect you. The heads of the Feds around the country don't elect you. It's the individuals who sit on the board of the New York Fed that elect you. Is that correct?
That's slightly more complicated than that. What the Congress did in setting up the Fed is set up a system where the presidents of the regional reserve banks are elected by their board, but it requires the approval of the chairman of the Board of Governors in Washington for them to serve. So it is a delicate balance of checks and balances, and Congress designed that system.
But it is largely private banks that elected you, and I would like you to provide that for the record, please.
Oh, absolutely. That's a matter of public record.
The Cleveland Fed is not equal to the New York Fed, so I'm very interested in your answer to the record. Number three. Goldman Sachs was the largest domestic recipient of funds in this AIG counterparty arrangement. Let me ask you, now as Treasury Secretary, your Chief of Staff is the gatekeeper for access to you. Could you please provide his name?
His name is Mark Patterson.
Thank you. And for whom did he work before you selected him as your chief of staff?
He worked for the president's transition team.
No, before that. Which Wall Street firm did he work for?
Before that, again, this is a matter of public record, and you know the answer to this question. He worked for Goldman Sachs. But
thank you very much. You answered my question, Mr. Secretary. Now let me say this: the AIG transaction. You have answered the question.
No, what
you've
you're doing
answered the question. Thank you. The AIG transaction was disturbing to many observers. Why did our government not require the bank creditors to take the lead and bear some of the cost in any plan to stabilize AIG? You, in effect, nationalized the company and let the bank creditors off the hook. Why did you, as president of the New York Fed, not work out an arrangement to remove the London unit from the company rather than allowing the unit to infect the entire company?
If we had had the types of bankruptcy procedures we have for banks, it is possible that ultimately we could have done that. And if it would have been easy and cheaper for the taxpayer for us to separate the riskiest parts of the firm from the healthy, profitable insurance companies, we would do that. And in fact, that is the core of the restructuring strategy the company is now undertaking. But that choice was not available to us at the time. If it had been possible, of course we would have done that. But because we did not have the tools that we have under bankruptcy, we did not have that choice.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Your phone logs from the subpoenaed material this committee requested, which I would like to insert in the record, show between September 14th and November 26th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The critical period when the bailout occurred, and just after September 15th, when the three major rating agencies downgraded AIG's credit rating, you made hundreds of calls, and the most, over 225, to Secretary Paulson, who was then Secretary of Treasury. What firm did he work for prior to his appointment as Secretary of Treasury?
He worked for Goldman Sachs.
He worked for Goldman Sachs. Now, Goldman Sachs, as I understand it, got the most in counterparty payments of any domestic institution. Is that true, $14 billion?
I actually don't know if it's that true, but that's a matter of public record.
Societe Generale got the most from an international firm, but Goldman Sachs was number one. Now, you made about 100 calls to Fed Chair Ben Bernanke, but then the next highest number of calls in that period, you made 103 to a man named Dan Jester. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll end. May I just ask, what firm did he work for?
He worked, as you know, he worked for Goldman Sachs.
Thank you, and I will have additional questions with regard to who you phoned, and we will place that in the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Paulson, I hear your pain when you said you're just pained to be on that side of the table answering the gentleman's question. But isn't it true that Goldman Sachs benefited from AIG bailout? They got $13 billion and was the largest recipient of the public funds from AIG. And in fact, creating the collateralized debt obligation, the CDOs, formed the basis of the current crisis we have today. But while you were CEO of Goldman Sachs, you were an active part of that business. So my problem is when you say you're pained by AIG, I go back to your bait and switch when you came here into Congress and you suddenly decided instead of buying the toxic loans, you're going to go out and start to give money to these people. So if you didn't have any credibility on the bait and switch, how do you have any credibility today to come before us and tell us that you're pained by AIG?
Well, let me respond.
Do you understand the credibility you have? You came here, you said in this 2.5-page bill that you wanted $750 billion. Then immediately after you got approval from Congress, you changed it. You baited us on, then you switched it, and then you started giving money to these institutions, the top 15 institutions, when all these people who had the loans, you could have worked out a homeowners equity plan around this country to help the people who are actually having their homes foreclosed. And you're helping AIG and you're helping Bank of America and you're bankrupting Lehman Brothers, who is your biggest competition. Isn't there some point you should have recused yourself and said, you know something, all my buddies in Goldman Sachs are over there. You know, I really feel that I shouldn't be making these decisions to make Lehman Brothers go bankrupt, that I really should recuse myself. And the fact is that you're coming here and say you feel the pain of AIG is just, it's just outrageous.
Well, I would like to respond to you, Congressman, because I find your statement outrageous.
Okay,
So
Mr. Paulson. Well, let me tell you, I have the time, Mr. Paulson. Let me just say one other thing.
No, I just want you speaking to the mic. Pull the mic.
Okay.
Let me just say one other thing here. You know, when you look at, you're saying to us, you support the Obama administration giving more power to the federal regulator, the Fed. But when you look, the Fed was on, Geithner was on board at the Fed, the New York Fed, dealing with all these institutions. He didn't get it. And then we had this fellow who came up afterward, Mr. Friedman. He was on the Goldman Sachs board, and he didn't last too long as the Fed chairman. Why? Because he had a conflict of interest. Is it possible that there's so much conflict of interest here that all you folks don't even realize that you're helping people that you're associated with, and you should be recusing yourself for America's ethics?
Well, let me make several comments. The first comment I will say is I came to Congress, I asked for the TARP, and I asked for authority to purchase illiquid assets.
But in 10 days you changed your opinion.
We changed because the situation changed dramatically.
In 10 days?
You betcha. If you look at what happened in that 10-day period, you look at what happened around the world, it changed dramatically. Number one. Secondly,
I don't want you to use all my time.
Okay, but I want to just respond to secondly. I left Goldman Sachs. I sold my shares in Goldman Sachs.
Tax deferred too. You didn't have to pay any tax on your $200 million.
I sold my shares in Goldman Sachs.
The clause that if you come into the administration, you sell your assets, it's tax deferred. You don't have to pay $200. If you had $200 million profit, and you didn't have to pay any tax. Isn't that true?
Listen, is
that true or not? Yes or no?
It is. You do not pay a profit when someone a tax when someone makes you sell assets.
Maybe that was an incentive for you to become Secretary of Treasury, so you didn't have to pay the tax there.
Oh. The next thing I would say to you, and say it very, very clearly, is I behaved with the...
you don't think you should have recused yourself when you asked Lehman to go in bankruptcy, you didn't put Bear Stearns in bankruptcy, and then you folded Merrill Lynch into... I mean, isn't there some point where you got to say, hey, I got a conflict of interest here? You don't feel any kind of scintilla of ethics on this thing at all?
Totally. I operated very consistently in the ethic guidelines I had as Secretary of the Treasury, and when it became clear that we had some very significant issues with Goldman Sachs and with
why didn't you recuse yourself
with Morgan Stanley, what I did then, it would have been very wrong for me to recuse myself. What I did was I went and got a waiver from the ethics agreement, because when we had concerns...
Who is in charge of the ethics agreement?
What?
Who's in charge of the ethics agreement that you got a waiver?
We have a Office of Ethics at Treasury, and we have a White House Ethics Office.
So you got it from the legal counsel from the White House?
We got it from the Government Ethics Office.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your courtesy. And I ask you now to consent my opening statement to be part of the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Yep.
The corrupt, over time, end up taking over a government, selling the public on a police state in the name of safety, and then the insider interests shut down all their competition, consolidate the economy, and the society implodes into a third world banana republic. The wages of globalism are abject poverty and oppression and humiliation. And it's not too late to turn this around. There is a big awakening happening. The question is it happening fast enough to beat the tyrannical clampdown that's happening worldwide? Everything we've talked about so far, right on time, has happened. Gold is at 1,860-something bucks last time I checked. And the devaluation of the dollar is moving forward. They're holding Europe hostage for trillions more to the private banks, or they will fully implode their economy. Europe will pay the ransom. The bankers will then implode it even faster. By the way, Rick Perry, and we've been looking into this, has always gotten big bank funding. And I was looking into his Texas state filings last night. Big money from the big top 6 banks. And I'm working with my writers to get a report on that out by next week. But other writers that are listening, you ought to scoop us into it. All I care about is that the information gets out there. Because Rick Perry says that he, thinks that the Federal Reserve is treacherous and almost treasonous. Almost treasonous. Really, a foreign banking private group running the country and running it into the ground by design and openly calling for world government and carbon taxes on every man, woman, and child. Fully financing Obama's campaign. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, others gave 4 times the money. Some banks 5 times the money, but on average 4 times the money that John McCain got. And again, it wasn't that John McCain was a good guy. It was that Obama was the next horse. He was the guy that they had picked to win, like a Don King fight. And so whoever gets the big banking money, is their man. And he just announced, obviously, on Saturday, but already Rick Perry is getting big banking money. The big darling, even above him, because he's been in the race for a few months, is Mitt Romney. Absolutely globalist financed, just like Rand Paul's, both of his competitors in the Republican primary and then in the main election for the Senate seat in Kentucky. The banksters just opened the coffers up, tens of millions flowed in. With Obama, of course, it was close to $1 billion, and more than half of it from the big mega banks. And then that way they own both sides of the fight. That's why they're all going after Ron Paul. But there's a Zero Hedge article that we've got linked up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Bank of America, dead drop to Rick Perry. We will help you out. This was a few days ago when Perry was in New Hampshire. It was caught live on C-SPAN. And you see one of the top minions of Bank of America come over to him and say, hey, it's Bank of America. We will help you out. Total mobster. It said, should we be surprised, frightened, disgusted, or simply say we knew it? That the informal mixer, just after Texas governor and Republican presidential candidate Rick Perry spoke at a politics and eggs breakfast in Bedford, New Hampshire, an unknown gentleman approaches a casual Perry like an Ian Fleming character out of James Bond and proceeds to dead drop the following. Bank of America will help you out, and silently moves on. At least we know now who is funding what and whose interest potential future President Perry will be paid to defend. And it looks like on the video, Perry nods very excitedly. So we'll go ahead and play that audio caught from a camera about 15 feet away. Perry doesn't know this is on camera. Here it is.
Bank of America, we will help you out.
All right, there you go. Let's back that up for folks again. Bank of America, we will help you out. And I've been trying to look at that guy's face, but he looks like a well-known Bank of America exec. We need the media to dig into that and find out exactly who he is. Let's go ahead and play that clip again.
Bank of America, we will help you out.
Is it like that? He knew how to walk right over and just get right in his ear and say, Bank of America, we will help you out. And that guy's body language, classic exec cookie cutter right out of Central Casting, is, hey, I'm dominant, you're subservient, Perry. We want you to be our minion. There's the Associated Press. Bank of America to cut 3,500 jobs, mainly the customer service type people, because they don't need that anymore. They've got the banker bailout money. They've got presidents that just pay them trillions so that they then don't loan the public money. And then the government pays them interest on the money they're holding. We went over that yesterday. We're going to come back and get into some of the other news. And we'll also break down Obama. He doesn't need Congress to legalize the illegals. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.
Dozens of Wall Street executives who once banked on President Obama are now banking on Mitt Romney. Add it all up, and it means roughly $150,000 for Romney's campaign pockets. On the phone with me right now, Fox Business Network's Charlie Gasparino. And Charlie, you'd be the first to remind it's still early. We don't want to glean any immediate conclusions from this, but your knee-jerk reaction would be what?
Well, I've said it before. I think Wall Street right now is splitting Obama and Romney. Listen, we should point out Romney is the candidate of choice for Wall Street on the Republican side. I don't believe anybody really associated with the Tea Party is going to get any major Wall Street support. I mean, Michelle Bachmann, I put in that category. Maybe even Rick Perry. Mitt Romney, someone else. Remember, he worked on Wall Street, Bain Capital. He ran it. He knows a lot of these guys. He's considered moderate to conservative. He's right where what Wall Street wants right now. And I will tell you this: what he has going for him right now is the president's massive unpopularity and the sort of sense, even among sort of Democrats, moderate Democrats on Wall Street, that he's not very confident when it comes to the economy. That's the sense on Wall Street. Put all that together, and stuff is moving in Romney's direction. It's early, Neil. And here's the other thing. If Obama looks like he's starting to win, well, you might see those numbers reverse. But you know what we're not going to have this year, I believe? Let's just say Romney does get the nomination, and it's a pretty tough case. It's a tough fight. We are not going to have the blowout numbers that you had in 2008, where Wall Street basically supported Obama 60-40. At Goldman Sachs, it was 70-30. Barring a Tea Party candidate, I think the street's going to at least split and maybe go much more heavily for Romney than they do for Obama.
Everyone's trying to glean through chicken entrails and tea leaves what a development means, Charlie. So at this stage, when either Wall Street or top financier money is going toward a particular candidate, in this case to Governor Romney, does it stay that way, mostly that way? Even with the McCain scare, when it looked like his campaign was looking wobbly, he still had the big party money on the big Wall Street backing in the early part of the Republican nomination race in 2008. And he never lost it. I'm just wondering, at least within the party is what I'm saying. Is there any chance that this doesn't follow through?
I mean, I think Mitt Romney can at least split Wall Street with Obama, which McCain really didn't do last time. And I said it before, and I said it again. I covered that Fat Cat fundraiser at Danielle. I covered it for you and your various shows, and I pointed out at that fundraiser that was at, I think that was 2 months ago.
Right.
There was not one senior executive of a Wall Street firm at there. It was filled with private equity people and lots of rich limousine liberals that, like the president, will still support him. I mean, he made a lot of money during that fundraiser. But Jamie Dimon was there. Lloyd Blankfein, who was a huge supporter of the president the last time, as was Goldman Sachs, as was his number two, Blankfein, number two, Gary Cohn, the two guys who run Goldman Sachs. Not there. Go down the list. It was devoid of any major bank Wall Street support, and that says a lot. And I'll tell you, if Romney wins, he's going to get a lot of banking money this time, particularly if it's close. If what we think is going to happen is going to happen. President's very weak. I'm not saying he's going to lose. He's going to, he's a good campaigner, but it'll be a close election. And I'll tell you, Wall Street desperately, when you talk to people, even moderate Democrats, they're really surprised that this guy is as much of a class warfare guy, a rhetoric. They don't like Dodd-Frank, let's face it.
Right.
That, they think it squeezes
Still
them
early,
out of business.
still early. All right, Charlie, thank you.
I'm not here to talk about plans to deal with this till 2017. I'm saying we've got a real problem, and I'm tired of Republicans and Democrats who either want Republicans who want to burn the place to the ground, and Democrats, with all due respect, who want to offer a plan that gets it through their end of their second term of their presidency, and then screws me and my kids when it's over. And until we do that, we have to deal with the extraction that is at foot. It is the reason the financial markets are behaving the way they're behaving. That is a mathematical fact. This is not some opinion. This is a mathematical fact. Tens of trillions of dollars are being extracted from the United States of America. Democrats aren't doing it. Republicans are not doing it. An entire integrated system, financial system, trading system, taxing system that was created by both parties over a period of 2 decades is at work on our entire country right now. And we're sitting here arguing about whether we should do the $4 trillion plan that kicks the can down the road for the president for 2017 or burn the place to the ground, both of which are reckless, irresponsible, and stupid. And the fact of the matter is, until we actually, and I'm sorry to lose my temper, but I tell you what, I've been coming on TV for 3 years doing this. And the fact of the matter is that there's a refusal on both the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to acknowledge the mathematical problem, which is that the United States of America is being extracted. It's being extracted through banking, it's being extracted through trade, and it's being extracted through taxation. And there's not a single politician that has stepped forward, Susan, to deal with this.
But there's only one right now. The leader of the free world, whether you like it or not, the President of the United States is arguably one of the most powerful individuals we have out there.
But
and
Susan,
he's
what you're saying is exactly the point that Dylan is making. It's not about one guy. It's about all of them.
No, I actually disagree. I think Dylan's saying it is about one guy.
It is about one guy.
What would you like him to do?
I would like him to go to the people of the United States of America and say, people of the United States of America, your Congress is bought. Your Congress is incapable of making legislation on health care, banking, trade, or taxes, because if they do it, they will lose their political funding, and they won't do it. But I'm the President of the United States, and I won't have a country that is run by a bought Congress. So I'm not going to work with a bought Congress and try to be Mr. Big Guy. I'm working with the bought Congress. I'm going to abandon the bought Congress like Teddy Roosevelt did, and I'm going to go to the people of the United States, and I'm going to say, you've got a bought Congress. And until we get rid of the bought Congress, which is Jimmy Williams' constant point, which is get the money out of politics, and until a president says that's the problem and says he's going to fix it, there is no policy that I can possibly see, no matter how brilliant your idea may be, or your idea, or my idea, or her idea, or your idea at home, is that idea will not happen as long as there's the capacity to basically fire a politician who disagrees with me by taking funding away from him. Is that a fair assessment?
Money in politics is the root of all political evil. It is corruption at its worst. And until we step up and kick that out of the park, it's going to be the same system all
and only the president could do that. We're going to keep you guys.
Congress has to do it too. The Congress has to do it too.
So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, two specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has the monopoly over the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest as well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this. By the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems, which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. At this time, the dominant families in the banking and business world were the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. And in the early 1900s, they sought to push once again legislation to create another central bank. However, they knew the government and public were very weary of such an institution, so they needed to create an incident to affect public opinion. So, J.P. Morgan, publicly considered a financial luminary at the time, exploited his mass influence by publishing rumors that a prominent bank in New York was insolvent or bankrupt. Morgan knew this would cause mass hysteria, which would affect other banks as well. And it did. The public, in fear of losing their deposits, immediately began mass withdrawals. Consequently, the banks were forced to call in their loans, causing the recipients to sell their property, and thus a spiral of bankruptcies, repossessions, and turmoil emerged. Putting the pieces together a few years later, Frederick Allen of Life magazine wrote, "The Morgan interests took advantage to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed." Unaware of the fraud, the Panic of 1907 led to a congressional investigation headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, who had intimate ties to the banking cartels and later became part of the Rockefeller family through marriage. The commission, led by Aldrich, recommended a central bank should be implemented so a panic like 1907 could never happen again. This was the spark the international bankers needed to initiate their plan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge that the 10 or so figures who attended disguised their names when en route to the island. After this bill was constructed, it was then handed over to their political frontman, Senator Nelson Aldrich, to push through Congress. And in 1913, with heavy political sponsorship by the bankers, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign support. And 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Years later, Woodrow Wilson wrote, in regret, Congressman Louis McFadden also expressed the truth after the passage of the bill. A world banking system was being set up here, a superstate controlled by international bankers, acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure. The Fed has usurped the government. Now, the public was told that the Federal Reserve System was an economic stabilizer, and inflation and economic crises were a thing of the past. Well, as history has shown, nothing is further from the truth. The fact is, the international bankers now had a streamlined machine to expand their personal ambitions.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
For example, from 1914 to 1919, the Fed increased the money supply by nearly 100%, resulting in extensive loans to small banks and the public. Then, in 1920, the Fed called in mass percentages of the outstanding money supply, thus resulting in the supporting banks having to call in huge numbers of loans, and, just like 1907, bank runs, bankruptcy, and collapse occurred. Over 5,400 competitive banks outside of the Federal Reserve System collapsed, further consolidating the monopoly of a small group of international bankers. Privy to this crime, Congressman Lindbergh stepped up and said in 1921, "Under the Federal Reserve Act, panics are scientifically created. The present panic is the first scientifically created one, worked out as we figure a mathematical equation." However, the panic of 1920 was just a warm-up. From 1921 to 1929, the Fed again increased the money supply, resulting once again in extensive loans to the public and banks. There was also a fairly new type of loan called a margin loan in the stock market. Very simply, the margin loan allowed an investor to put down only 10% of a stock's price, with the other 90% being loaned through the broker. In other words, a person could own $1,000 worth of stock with only $100 down. This method was very popular in the roaring 1920s, as everyone seemed to be making money in the market. However, there was a catch to this loan. It could be called in at any time and had to be paid within 24 hours. This is termed a margin call, and the typical result of a margin call is the selling of the stock purchased with the loan. So, a few months before October in 1929, J.D. Rockefeller, Bernard Baruch, and other insiders quietly exited the market, and on October 24, 1929, the New York financiers who furnished the margin loans started calling them in masse. This sparked an instantaneous, massive sell-off in the market, for everyone had to cover the margin loans. It then triggered mass bank runs for the same reason, in turn collapsing over 16,000 banks, enabling the conspiring international bankers to not only buy up rival banks at a discount, but to also buy up whole corporations at pennies on the dollar. It was the greatest robbery in American history. But that didn't stop there. Rather than expanding the money supply in order to recover from this economic collapse, the Fed actually contracted it, fueling one of the largest depressions in history. Once again outraged, Congressman Louis McFadden, a longtime opponent of the banking cartels, began bringing impeachment proceedings against the Federal Reserve Board, saying of the crash and depression, "It was a carefully contrived occurrence. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all." Not surprisingly, and after 2 previous assassination attempts, McFadden was poisoned at a banquet before he could push for the impeachment. Now, having reduced the society to squalor, the Federal Reserve bankers decided that the gold standard should be removed. In order to do this, they needed to acquire the remaining gold in the system. So, under the pretense of helping to end the Depression, came the 1933 gold seizure. Under the threat of imprisonment for 10 years, everyone in America was required to turn in all gold bullion to the Treasury, essentially robbing the public of what little wealth they had left. And at the end of 1933, the gold standard was abolished. If you look at a dollar bill from before 1933, it says it is redeemable in gold. You look at a dollar bill today, it says it is legal tender, which means it is backed by absolutely nothing. It is worthless paper. The only thing that gives our money value is how much of it is in circulation. Therefore, the power to regulate the money supply is also the power to regulate its value, which is also the power to bring entire economies and societies to its knees.
What about the candidate Ron Paul, who's talking about bringing the powers of the Federal Reserve back to the U.S. government, presidential control or control of Congress?
I haven't read about that. It's an issue.
But he's one of the Republican.
He's a Republican candidate, and that's what he's publicly calling for. So,
I would not look upon that as one of the great issues that needs to be addressed at this time.
Mr. Kucinich. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
All right. We have to put America back to work. Our program actually is pretty simple. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Put people back to work with good-paying jobs. How do you do that? There's over $1.6 trillion in infrastructure needs that are unmet, that can't be met by local or state governments. The stimulus package that we hear discussion about does want to do something about addressing infrastructure that's significant. We should support that. But we also have to look at our experience, and we don't want to be tarped again in this Congress. Because this Congress voted for a $350 billion bailout of banks. I didn't vote for it, but the House and the Senate voted for it. And it resulted in the banks using the money not to help people stay in their homes, but in using the money to buy other banks, take over other banks. They hoarded the money. There is a credit freeze. But there are some broader issues here we have to look at. The banks have shown that they can't be trusted with the American economy. That's generally been the case, but now it's out in the open, $350 billion later. In 1913, the money power of the country was taken away from the people. By constitutional privilege, it belongs with the Congress, but it was given up in the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express, but yet it has the power to determine the direction of use of money in our economy. If we could take that power back and put the Federal Reserve under Treasury, we start to be in a position of being able to control monetary policy on behalf of the United States people. We also have to address the issue of the fractional reserve system, which is how banks create money out of thin air. And then as they do that, they've created the conditions where we've had this kind of Ponzi scheme collapsing, banks and the hedge funds working together. So we have to halt the banks' privilege to create money by ending the fractional reserve system. Past monetized credit would be converted into U.S. government money, and banks would act as intermediaries, accepting deposits and loaning them out to borrowers. Fine. But then, with the ability to control our fortunes, we then, once we control money again, we spend the money into circulation and infrastructure. Not just the physical infrastructure, but also on health care. We not only can address housing needs, rebuilding America's infrastructure, but we can also get people the health care they need in this country. We can enable children to stay in school or to go back to school. We really have the opportunity to take control of our own destiny again. But we can't go back to the same old, trickle down economics. The trickle never gets down. The invisible hand of the marketplace is in the hands of the is in the pockets of the American taxpayers. The invisible hand of the marketplace in the pocket of American taxpayers. Let's rebuild America. Let's reclaim our economic destiny.
The point I'm getting at is the video clip you're about to see, and then we're going to go to break and come back with Kurt Haskell. The video clip you're about to see is so important because it shows how perception works. I fall for the very same thing I'm always talking about. And I'll go ahead and give you the answer before we go to it. because a lot of you won't catch it, because I didn't catch it until the third time I saw it. Everything is about coloration in nature. You've got a lot of butterflies that have what looks like the eyes of a predator on its wings. You've got caterpillars that camouflage themselves like a predator. You've got a lot of this going on. And the private Federal Reserve is private. It took over the country 98 years ago. Its charter is up in 2 years. We could get rid of it then just by not renewing its charter. Amazing. Kind of like the Patriot Act's up every few years. We could get rid of it. That's one thing the establishment does, is they always put a time limit on something. So if they want to get rid of something, they can. But we've come up to this point now of 6 big mega banks who met in secret 100 years ago. They met in 1910. So I guess now a little over 100 years ago. They met, and they've bragged about it since then. J.P. Morgan, the actual J.P. Morgan, not the J.P. Morgan of today, but same company. Other, the Rockefellers, you name it. They met at Jekyll Island, and they said, we'll call ourselves federal, and we'll also use our newspapers to attack the Federal Reserve and say we don't want it. And because we're so universally hated, being the robber barons that have done all this horrible stuff, the people will support it. But actually, the people didn't support it. They woke up to that scam, so they had a non-quorum vote. 3 senators passed the Federal Reserve Act on December 23rd, right before Christmas, at almost midnight. So here we are 90-plus years later, 98 years later, 100-plus years since their secret meeting at Jekyll Island to conceive this act, trying to get rid of it. And the cops all over the country, even in Dallas, I say 10 years ago, some of the cops were still laughing at me in Dallas because they had stuck signs up and put fences up saying private property. And I said, look, it looks like a federal building. It's got a big armored wall around it. And it says Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, Texas. But look right there, they stuck these signs in the dirt, in the grass, saying, this is private property, keep off. Federal Reserve, private property, keep off. And I was saying, don't you see the hoax? This is camouflaged. This is like a man dressed up like a woman or something trying to go in the women's bathroom. I mean, this is like German soldiers trying to infiltrate New Jersey during World War II, dressed up like American soldiers trying to blow up ammo dumps. That actually happened. I'm like, this is fake. And the cops would go, oh, listen to this conspiracy theorist. Because the feds, and we've gotten these from good police that are awake, issue them every month, training manuals and alerts saying the Federal Reserve is a federal agency. It's here to keep America safe. These dangerous kooks are coming to tell you it's not federal. Don't listen to them. So I'm there talking to the cops saying, please, this is private. Look, it looks like a federal building. It says it's federal. It's not. And some were laughing. A few were nodding, saying, we agree with you. The head cop, called me on the phone before and said, oh, I know, about this, but, I just want to make sure everything's going to be peaceful. So some of the cops were nodding their head and waving at me, but others were still laughing. Now, you go to San Antonio, and I'm around the corner interviewing Matt Medina out of the rain, under the awnings there, and they come over to the interview, and they go, the cops are here, they want to talk to you. So I tell Medina, we probably should have left that in the clip, I didn't tell the guys to, where I go, hey, we got to go talk to the cops, hold on a minute. So then I go over, and they tell me, yeah, the cops are saying it's private property, get off. So I'm told these are cops. One of them was a San Antonio senior officer in his uniform, but the other guy he called captain was actually the head of Federal Reserve Security in San Antonio. But because people told me they were cops, I just automatically thought he was a cop until I went back and watched the video and then went and checked it. He's the head of security there. He said, if you don't like what's happening, you can call our head office in Dallas. That's the Federal Reserve for 4 states. Region 11 is based in Dallas. This was a satellite bank we were protesting. First the main bank, then the Houston Bank, then the San Antonio Bank. The 3 branches here, but the head one's Dallas for 4-state area. And here I was, see the video shot, go home, think they're cops, and it wasn't until I aired the video on the radio that I thought, wait a minute, that guy may be Federal Reserve. Then I went and researched it this morning. He was Federal Reserve. So see how even smart people who aren't totally paying attention because you're busy, and they keep you busy, it looks like a federal building. It says federal. It's got a big American Eagle seal on it. We get fooled by this stuff. We get fooled by the packaging. So I ran the headline. It's a very popular video. Cops admit Federal Reserve is private. The truth was, I go to the cop, the San Antonio cop, in the clip coming up, in his uniform, the officer, and I say to him, hey, I heard you're saying this is private. You know it's private? He goes, talk to Captain such and such, who's the Federal Reserve guy. And he goes, no, we're private. Please leave. Call our head office in Dallas if you want. And I walk off thinking, because I'm told it's cops, that it's cops, so I think about it. But we actually had the head of security for the Federal Reserve admit it was private. And some people, my final point is this, some people think that, well, Alex, big deal, so they admit it's private. We all know that. We don't all know that. The San Antonio cop, who's a senior cop, I forget, is he like a lieutenant or something? You can look at his uniform when it comes up. The guy they sent out there on Sunday afternoon, he said, I don't know. And as soon as he saw the guy admit, yeah, we're private, please get out of here, see the cop starts smiling. I'm going, hey, you ought to criminally investigate this. And the cop's smiling more, because for all these years, he's been told this is federal. And I'm going, look how it looks like a federal building. Look at the seals. Look at the names. And as a cop, he's going, yeah, this is weird. The head of security is admitting this is private. This is the first time he's hearing the truth. And it's a put the sunglasses on, they live moment, or a take the red pill moment, or a pull the curtain back and Wizard of Oz moment. And that's all I'm asking you to do. I'm not going to be able to show you the truth in the world. We all have our own perspectives. We all are limited. But you individually can decide to take the glasses off. And or put them on, actually, or take the red pill, or pull the curtain back. I know that you are not seeing the full reality. None of us are. So all I'm asking is put the sunglasses on, take the red pill, pull back the curtain, wake up from your sleep, whatever you want to call it. Here's this video clip of the head of security for the Federal Reserve admitting that it is a private organization, and please get off their private property. And then we'll go to break and come back with bombshell info, and I mean bombshell, with Kurt Askel. It's InfoWars Nightly News. Stay with us. Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Alex Jones.
Good, how you doing?
Good. Can you just repeat, you're saying this is private property?
I don't know. This is the captain.
Sure, go ahead,
yes,
sir.
This is the property of the Federal Reserve right here.
Private, though. It's not federal, right?
Yeah, private property. Okay. I need you to go back to the public street.
I think, you know what? It is private property. I think you're right. We will get off. You're absolutely right. Let me just ask you this one question, and I'm going to ask everybody to move off the private property of the Federal Reserve. Doesn't this look like a post office, and it's got federal seals on it? It says Federal Reserve. It's like counterfeiting or something. It'd be like if people opened up a...
No, the Fed doesn't counterfeit, do they?
I think that's something police ought to investigate.
Yeah, really.
I mean, just down the road. Doesn't this kind of look weird? It's a federal building, but it's not federal.
I mentioned that to them. They said
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Not a federal building.
It's not a federal building.
It's a
10 years ago, cops were laughing at me about that. I'm excited you know.
However, you're welcome to call our public affairs or call our head office in Dallas and speak with them.
No, sir, you've been super nice. You're right. Some people thought it was like a park because it looked like a post office. You're right. This is private property. We better get off. We better go. Hey, guys, well, they do get our tax money, and they do control everything. Enslave us! I mean, sure, they are the slave masters.
There have been some serious consequences
of our lack of respect and our loss of liberty and lack of concern and defense of our republic. And we're suffering the consequences. This is what we're talking about. How can we reverse this trend? I think we have to understand how it happened, what the problems were, and what we have to aim for. But we've had a lot of problems because of this. Number one, economic problems, because they do not understand the Constitution and economics on monetaries. I mean, it is very clear what we should be doing. The founders knew and understood something about inflation. The runaway inflation of the continental dollar was devastating to the economy, so they were explicit. They said no emitting of bills of credit, no printing money, no paper money, and that only gold and silver should be legal tender. There is no authority in the Constitution authorizing a central bank, which means there should be no Federal Reserve System. No! Now, can you believe that 18 months ago, at the beginning of this campaign, that I didn't believe any of you existed and cared about or understood anything about the Federal Reserve? It's great.
Why are they so scared of Ron Paul?
Well, Ron Paul makes a lot of sense, and more people ought to listen to him.
It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars. You've heard the war propaganda that is liable to lead us into the sixth war, and I worry about that position. Iran does not have an air force that can come here. They can't even make enough gasoline for themselves.
As the race for the Republican nomination heats up, there is one candidate who has been largely ignored by the mainstream media. Shame on us. He deserves more attention from us than he's getting.
We're in absolute panic mode because they've looked at the numbers and they know Ron Paul is the real front runner in the 2012 election.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little vote?
When Ron Paul ran for the Republican nomination in 2008, he talked about the economy imploding, the untenable nature of the national debt, the eventual destruction of our currency, and the limited role for government. In the 4 years since then, a lot of the things Ron Paul warned us about have happened. We're deeper in debt, a lot deeper. The dollar is worth quite a bit less, and the country is more divided maybe than at any time since the Civil War.
Pretending Ron Paul doesn't exist for some reason has been going on for weeks.
A new Gallup survey showing Rick Perry running second to Mitt Romney, knocking down Iowa favorite Michelle Bachmann to fourth.
Behind who? The media don't remember Ron Paul. It's only to reassure themselves how there's no need to remember Ron Paul.
Right now, live, right next to the bus behind us, Ron Paul is speaking.
And guess what, Paul? If you get video of Sarah Palin or get a soundbite from her, bring that back to us. You can hold the Ron Paul stuff.
You
Whatever presidential hopeful embodied the notion of personal freedom and fidelity to the Constitution, it would be Texas Republican Congressman Ron Paul.
He's gotten more money from the military than all the other Republicans combined, and he's gotten more than Obama got. Think about that.
You've got, and you set the record. In the history of American politics, nobody has ever raised more money on a single day than you.
Gosh.
Minimize the federal government. When you have big state government, small federal government, our voices are heard at the local level. We can make differences. A whole continent wide cannot control a federal government with a banking system that prints money like it's paper. You can't even call it money anymore. Gold is money. Silver is money. Green dollars are not money. They're using inflation as a hidden tax to fuck the people. Prices go up. Do your wages go up? No. My wages didn't go up, but prices went up. Gas goes up. Milk goes up. Trains go up. How am I supposed to live? And this is all because our government prints too much money, starts too much wars, so they can sell their tanks, their guns, their missiles. Because that's all America exports. Is guns, missiles, and tanks. That's it. We need to bring production back to America. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. When you invest $100 in a bank, they multiply that by 9 and they send it out 9 different ways. They don't just make money on the initial investment, they make it 9 times the initial investment. That's fake money that they printed out of thin air. Fiat money. It's a fiat currency. 1913, this country died when we adopted the central bank and we got rid of sound money. We used to be able in 1913 to walk into a bank and redeem our dollars with gold. Can we do that anymore? No. What's the price of gold now? Almost $2,000. It's gone up $600 an ounce this year. It's going to keep rising. And it's going to keep rising as long as we have bailouts, as long as we have quantitative easing, as long as our government keeps spending our money. Every dollar the government takes in federal taxation is another dollar that they spend. Every time they spend money, that's your money that they send overseas. They bail out Morgan Stanley and then Goldman Sachs. When I fuck up, who bails me out? No one. Why should Goldman Sachs get bailed out? $700 billion in 08. And they want more now? They want more. That wasn't enough? You're gonna drain. There's not gonna be a middle class in 10 years. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. And the Fed. Elect Ron Paul and the wars. Ron Paul 2012. Sound money. Stop with the banksters printing money. Printing and debasing our currencies. Driving up our prices. We don't need any more money in our economy. We got plenty in debt. No. And the Fed. And the fractional reserve system. And the wars. Get corporations out of our politics. Yes. Out of our politics.
And corporate personhood.
Wall Street is rigged. When Wall Street owns a majority of the wealth and they invest in Wall Street, they know when the market's going to go up, they know when the market's going to go down, and they all make money while we all lose money. How is that fair? And then after thousands, trillions of derivatives, they want bailouts. They have the balls to ask us for bailouts. No more bailouts. No more printing of money. No more quantitative easing. And the Federal Reserve. And the fractional banking system. Sound money. Go back to a gold standard. The Depression will be nothing compared to 1913 when it hits us. 1930, when the Depression came, will be nothing like it will be in the coming years. If we lose America, we have nowhere else to run for freedom. There is no country left that promotes free markets, corporations, not in politics. There's no country that has their own sound currency. There is nowhere left to run. If we lose America, we lose the world to the elite. The 1% will continue to get rich as we all live like slaves. If you think the way of life is bad now, you will all be living in projects like Hoovervilles. We cannot continue to print money. We cannot continue to debase our currency. We need to end the Federal Reserve. We need to get lobbyists, Goldman Sachs, George Soros, Merrill Lynch, everyone out of our politics. Why should they be allowed to throw millions at politicians so they do what we want? They're supposed to be our voice, not their voice. States' rights. When you minimize government, it is easier to control by the people. States' rights. You need to give the rights back to the states. Minimize these government agencies like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loaned out money that private bankers would not loan out. People that they did not trust in. The government loaned money. That's ridiculous. They took money out of all of your pockets instead of buying that car you wanted, those shoes you wanted. They put it toward a bridge in Iowa. Why don't we just pay a state tax, and New York State helps New York State, and we pay a federal government tax to police our border. That's the only thing the federal government is here for, to keep our borders safe. Everything else should be on the state level. If you don't like the policy in one state, you go to another state, because that's how America was set up. America was not supposed to be uniform in policy. Each state was supposed to reflect the views and positions of everyone in that state. It is much easier to influence governors and mayors than presidents and vice presidents. And the Federal Reserve and the fractional banking system. Stop with the military-industrial complex. These wars. We have our own problem. We don't need to be in the Middle East. We don't need to invade a new country every year to sell more weapons. The only thing that says made in America are guns, missiles, and tanks. Don't forget that. Bring production back to America.
We don't have any beef with the people around the world. It's not us and them, nationalism. We don't have beef with the people around the world. We support people around the world who are in struggle with us. It's not the U.S. versus them. That's not the kind of politics that's going to move us forward.
We have our own problem.
If there's anyone who's here who wants to protest,
Mic check.
A group of individuals
held a protest
at Citibank,
and
some wanted to close their bank accounts with Citibank. When asked to leave, they began to exit, but were locked in by security. When cops arrived, Citibank security came outside and dragged two individuals back inside to hold them under arrest.
This is my guardian.
headquarters is like 2 more blocks out back at the car.
Let me give you a perfect example of why these folks are occupying Wall Street and protesting the control that the banks have over our government. It's a deal that Bank of America just did. It's an internal deal for them. They had some tremendous amount of money in derivatives that they were betting on Europe. Now, as you know, Europe's situation is not going well, and they're having harder and harder time delivering on those bets. And some of their counterparties that they made the bets with are saying, hey, you know what? We don't think you have enough money to back up your bets. And so they're in a world of trouble. So what do? They say, hey, you know what? We'll take it from the portion of our bank that's mainly for investments and gambling, and we'll move it to the portion of the bank that has the depositor's money. Because the depositor's money, including your money, is what backs up those bets. So if those bets go wrong, they go, well, the only money we have is your money, so we're going to pay with that. Now, they shouldn't be allowed to do that because the government is supposed to protect us because, for example, the government has FDIC. That protects your money in all these banks up to $250,000. So if something goes wrong, ultimately the government is responsible. So they should tell, for example, Bank of America, hey, you know what? You can't transfer all that money that we would eventually have to insure with government money. It doesn't make sense. In fact, the FDIC is saying that. But guess who's standing up for Bank of America? The Fed. The Federal Reserve is disagreeing with the FDIC and has basically, in effect, already allowed Bank of America to transfer that money. Now you want to know how much it is? Bank of America has $75 trillion in derivatives bets. Now, if that goes wrong, what do you think happens to Bank of America? Obviously, they go under. Who's got $75 trillion? That's absurd, okay? That's a quarter of the money of the entire world combined. Not their income, the wealth of the world combined. So, of course, if a tiny little thing goes wrong, that whole thing can come crashing down. And when it does, who's left holding the bag? We are. That's why people are protesting. We don't want to be left holding the bag. We don't want to guarantee and insure $75 trillion worth of bets from Bank of America. And by the way, JP Morgan, which claims to be a stable bank, and that they say that they should have less leverage in their bank, they have $79 trillion worth of derivatives bets, and 99% of that is backed up by depositor money. So this whole thing is a scam on you. You're depositing money that they are betting with, and then even if it crashes, it comes out of taxpayers' pockets. It's not that we're against banks in general. It's not that we're against capitalism in general. We're just against using crony capitalism to make bets with our money. And if you win, you keep it and you get your yachts and mansions. If you lose, we pay the bills. Conservatives should hate that. Liberals should hate that. Libertarians, I know, hate that. And the whole American population should be against it. And that's why you're getting the numbers showing that by a 2-to-1 margin, the American people are in favor of Occupy Wall Street. That's the thing that they hate. And that is unjustifiable.
Just for profit, and I'm tired of it. I want to make a protest that I don't want to do business with that type of people who they get most of their money. A lot of their money goes to those loans or payday loans that charge exorbitant interest. And I don't know why would a company like Bank of America participate in something like that. And those payday loan people fire upon my people, on low-income people. So I want to make a protest, go to another bank.
So what'd you do today?
Well, they wouldn't let me in, so I had to push them. And somebody stopped me because they pointed at the SWAT team. It's right there. I don't believe they got a legal right to keep me from getting my money. That's why I pushed him. I wanted to do a run on the bank. Forget about the SWAT team. I got a legal right to enter that bank and take my money out. Here's my Bank of America card. Here's my certificate of deposit, $5,000, maybe 6 for interest, I don't know. I had it in there so long, but now I want to pull it out. So I'm not just, I got every right to be in that bank. And they have no right to keep me from being in there. That's why I pushed them.
Tell us what happened when you tried to get in.
Well, they blocked it. The three of them came together like linemen protecting the quarterback. They were taking Bank of America. So I'm playing like a defensive lineman, and I'm trying to push them get through.
So you saying that they will not let you in the building at all?
They would not let me get past that barricade where those three guys are.
So
I talked to the lieutenant of the St. Louis Police Department, and he said they don't have a legal right, but he was going to try to work out something where a symbolic gesture where 8 people could pull out their money. I'm being one of them. He came back later and said they would not go along with that you would have to withdraw your money online. Now, that'll make no sense. Suppose I don't have a computer.
Did you tell them why you were here?
No, they could see why I was here.
I mean, did you tell them you want to go in and withdraw your money?
Oh, yeah. I told them. I showed them my card. I showed them my deposit.
Did you tell them you were a customer?
Yeah. This card tells them I'm a customer. And I got a current letter saying I'm a customer. And they wouldn't let me in. But they were letting other people in, which I feel that's discrimination.
What do you want to do with your money instead of having it here?
I want to put it in a local bank. I'm going to find a local bank. First, I want them to write me a check, and then I'm going to look for a local bank that's more pro-housing, more pro the community.
Are there other people here that were here to withdraw their money? Most
of the people here, but they wouldn't let nobody do it.
So most of those people there are intending to go in and withdraw their money?
That was our intention until, in fact, they told us we could do it. And then all of a sudden, somebody changed the rule. When I first got here, he said, we're going to let you go in and withdraw your money. And then when I got ready to go in and withdraw my money, he said, oh, we lied. You can't get in.
Did they tell you why?
In fact, they quit talking. They just blocked. They won't tell me their names. They won't tell me their positions.
Well, listen up. Here's who's growing. A second, a government has done a study now to help authorities identify domestic terrorists. See if any of these potential warning signs seem familiar. The report was put together by the Missouri Information Analysis Center. It warns that militia members most commonly associate with third-party political groups. They may display Constitutional Party, Campaign for Liberty, or libertarian material. Militia members are, quote, usually supporters of Ron Paul, or Chuck Baldwin, or Bob Barr. A motivation for militia activity, according to the government now, is the anticipation of the economic collapse of the U.S. government. Uh-oh. And the report continues that militia members may have cartoons and bumper stickers. Yes, with anti-government rhetoric. Or sometimes they'll have a Ron Paul bumper sticker. Or they'll have this flag, don't tread on me. It's a snake. This is a flag that was used during the Revolutionary War. It reads, don't tread on me. The rattlesnake, it has 13 rattles on it, representing the 13 colonies, and they're never to be split apart or it doesn't rattle and warn people. This is our founding fathers. Apparently, one of the most popular among militia members is this flag. If I only had a cartoon, a Ron Paul bumper sticker, and started yelling, get off my land right now, you could safely call me an enemy of the state. And it's all of a sudden, you can't talk about anything. You can't, and it's not just, people are like, well, that's what you get for saying Hollywood should shut its mouth. This is not the same. This is Republicans and Democrats. This is saying if you're an independent, you might not be able to be trusted.
No. The people that are speaking out, the people that are Ron Paul, Bob Barr, the people who are saying there's some problems with the government, the people like you are not planning violence. They're actually working within the system.
Every time you hear about somebody who has done something crazy, it's the same thing. I didn't know he was so quiet.
The loud nuts, the people that really speak out, are if there's going to be some problem from them, it's going to be gathering everyone together. What they're afraid of is not the violence. What they're afraid of is so many people are getting so disgusted with a fake two-party system that's really a one-party system that these people may actually get traction.
Okay.
It's the bumper stickers they're afraid of, not the guns.
Okay, let me return with you here in just a second, Penn, but I want you to hang on because I want you to see the questions that you ask yourself. Are you a militia member? Wait until you see some of the stuff. Some of the stuff is crazy, and other things are like, well, I've been on the internet before. Let me ask you this. Do you believe, this is one of the earmarks that you might be in a militia. Do you believe President Obama is tight on gun control?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Better watch you. Do you fear President Obama will enact firearm confiscations?
Well, confiscations, maybe, sure.
Have you ever been in like a Google chat room or been online on chat rooms?
I've been in chat rooms, yeah.
Oh boy, I love this question. I don't even know what this one means.
None of them political.
Have you? Anybody thinking too much information here? Tell me what this one even means. Have you ever been seen in public doing community service work? Damn those people.
Yeah, what is that? What are they even looking at for?
I don't have any idea.
I mean, I have no idea what that means. I mean, does that mean if you volunteer at a nursing home, you're going to blow something up?
Might be. I'm not sure. You know what? Here's the deal. Penn, I appreciate your time. I'd love to have you on again because on Monday I want to do a full hour on this report. And we did it on radio today. You tell me, a lot of them are like, crazy nut job stuff, but some of them are like, well, wait a minute, I've done that.
But I'll stick up for the crazy nut jobs, too. You're allowed to think and feel and express what you want in this country.
Here's what we should be watching.
If you are not going for violence, you're okay.
Thank you.
The people of the Middle East, like people everywhere, are seeking a chance to contribute and to have a role in the decisions that will shape their lives. Leaders need to respond to these aspirations and to help build that better future for all. They need to view civil society as their partner, not as a threat.
I want to take this opportunity to update the American people about the situation in Libya. Last month, protesters took to the streets across the country to demand their universal rights and a government that is accountable to them and responsive to their aspirations. But they were met with an iron fist.
Freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and freedom of the press.
Come here, Chris. Do you want to get arrested or no?
Are pillars of an open and inclusive society. There is a clear responsibility by the Egyptian government to hold accountable those responsible for these attacks.
have sought nothing more than to exercise their universal rights. We call upon the Iranian government to abide by the international obligations that it has to respect the rights of its own people. We call for the immediate release of all who have been unjustly detained. And I'm confident that history will be on the side of those who seek justice.
I will not stand by and just watch. I will not do it. So take me to jail right now, because I will not. After all that my parents gave me, I can do one thing for them and tell them that I would rather die than be quiet and watch everything that they worked for go away.
When all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
I'm not moving. I'm not moving. And I'm not moving. I'm a law student at George Washington University, and I'm not moving. I will go to jail tonight because it's not right.
We are against violence, and we would call to account the Iranian government that is once again using its security forces and resorting to violence to prevent the free expression of ideas from their own people.
Instead of respecting the rights of his own people, Gaddafi chose the path of brutal suppression. Innocent civilians were imprisoned.
I have not been read my rights. I have not been told I am being detained.
We want to know the people who are in there. We want to know all their names, what they're being charged with.
And in some cases beaten.
He can't breathe, officer. Please get off his neck.
I need my inhaler.
A campaign of intimidation and repression began.
It is the responsibility of the government of Libya to respect the universal rights of their own people, including their right to free expression and assembly.
What's his badge number? What is his badge number?
Demonstrators have been beaten, attacked. It is absolutely clear that the Syrian government is running out of time.
Each new depiction of the abuses of the police on the First Amendment, the more people will show up here in New York City, and the more waves of occupation will spread across this country. And you should be proud of that, police, because you are participating in our media publicity campaign. Thank you for attending.
What is absolutely clear is that we are witnessing history unfold. It's a moment of transformation that's taking place because the people of Egypt are calling for change. They've turned out in extraordinary numbers representing all ages and all walks of life. But it's young people who've been at the forefront. A new generation. Your generation, who want their voices to be heard.
when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.